The phone buzzed at 4:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd made at 3 and hadn't touched since. The mug had gone cold in my hands. I'd been staring at the wall behind the toaster, not thinking about anything in particular, just existing in that way you do when grief has flattened your sleep schedule into something unrecognizable. I didn't hear the buzz at first. Or rather, I heard it the way you hear the refrigerator compressor cycling on, as part of the room's texture. It wasn't until it stopped that I noticed it had happened. My phone was on the counter, plugged in near the microwave. The screen was already dark again by the time I looked at it. I didn't get up. I took a sip of the cold coffee, grimaced, and continued sitting there. Whatever it was could wait. It waited until 6:15, when I finally stood up because my lower back had locked into a knot. The gray light coming through the window above the sink had shifted from pre-dawn to something that felt like it demanded participation. I unplugged the phone and looked at the notification. 1 voicemail, unknown number. I almost deleted it. I'd been getting spam calls constantly. Something about Marcus's phone number being recycled, or maybe the estate paperwork triggering some cascade in whatever database telemarketers pull from. Every few days, another call about extended warranties or solar panel installations. Always from numbers I didn't recognize. I'd stopped answering my phone entirely about a week after the funeral. But something made me tap the voicemail icon instead of swiping it away. I don't know what. Probably nothing. Probably just the fact that I was tired and my finger moved before my brain caught up. The voicemail was 11 seconds long. The first 3 seconds were silence, not dead silence. There was a quality to it, a kind of room tone. Like someone had called from inside a space with walls and air, and maybe a window open somewhere, because there was a faint irregularity to the quiet, a texture. Then Marcus's voice said, "Hey, Danny, I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this," and then it cut off, not like a disconnection, more like someone had gently placed their hand over the receiver. A soft stop, then 3 more seconds of that same room tone, and the voicemail ended. I played it again. Then I played it a 3rd time. His voice sounded normal. That was the thing. It didn't sound distant or distorted or echoey or any of the things you'd want it to sound like, so you could explain it away as a glitch, a misdirected recording. Some artifact of cellular infrastructure. It sounded like Marcus calling me on a Tuesday afternoon to ask if I wanted to come over for dinner. It sounded like him mid-thought, already 3 steps into a conversation he'd been having in his head before he dialed. That was how he always called. Never, "Hi, how are you?" Always jumping in like you'd been walking beside him the whole time, and he was just now turning to include you. I sat back down at the kitchen table. The cold coffee was still there. The morning light was getting stronger, and I could hear my neighbor's sprinkler system kick on. That rhythmic tat-tex-cat-tex-tex-cat-tex sound through the wall. I played the voicemail a 4th time, and then I set the phone face down on the table and put my hand on top of it, and just breathed. Marcus had been dead for 23 days. He died on a Saturday, aortic dissection. He was 41 years old and had no history of heart problems and had gone for a run that morning. and had come home and sat down on his couch, and then his wife Ellen had come downstairs 20 minutes later to find him unresponsive. He was dead before the paramedics arrived. They told Ellen it was almost certainly instantaneous. A tearing in the wall of the aorta. No warning, no symptoms. A thing that simply happens sometimes to people who are healthy and young enough that it feels like an error in the system. The funeral had been 3 weeks ago. I'd given the eulogy because our parents were both dead and I was the older brother and there was no one else to do it. I don't remember what I said. People told me afterward that it was beautiful, that I'd captured him perfectly, and I nodded and thanked them, and didn't tell them that I'd blacked out somewhere between the 2nd and 4th. Sentences and the rest had come from somewhere I couldn't access consciously. I'd been doing okay. That's what I told people. I'd been doing okay because what else do you say? The truth was that I hadn't cried yet, and I didn't know what that meant. The truth was that I still had Marcus' contact in my phone, and sometimes I'd open our text thread and scroll up through the last few weeks of messages. Logistics about when I'd come visit, a link to a podcast he thought I'd like, a photo of his dog wearing a bandana, and it felt like reading a conversation between two strangers. Like the Danny who texted lol perfect in response to the dog photo was someone I used to know. I called my carrier at 80 when their customer service line opened. I sat on hold for 14 minutes, listening to a loop of smooth jazz that recycled every 90 seconds. When a representative answered, I explained that I'd received a voicemail from an unknown number and wanted to know if they could tell me the originating number. She asked for my account PIN. I gave it. She pulled up the record. It looks like that voicemail was deposited at 4:47 a.m. from, she paused. That's odd. It's showing as an internal system delivery, like a delayed message. What does that mean? Sometimes voicemails get stuck in the system. If there's a server issue or a routing problem, a message might not get delivered for hours or even days after it was originally left. It's rare, but it happens. Can you tell when it was originally recorded? More clicking, a pause. I'm seeing a deposit timestamp of today, but the origination data is, hold on, more clicking. I'm going to transfer you to our technical support team. They might be able to pull more detailed routing information. I was on hold again. The smooth jazz came back. I waited 6 minutes, and then the line went dead. I didn't call back. A delayed voicemail. That was the rational explanation. Marcus had called me sometime before he died, maybe that morning, maybe the day before, and the voicemail had gotten stuck somewhere in the network infrastructure and had only just now been delivered 3 weeks late. A ghost in the machine in the most literal, non-supernatural sense. Cellular systems are imperfect. Data gets trapped. Packets get misrouted. It was unusual, but it was not impossible. I played the voicemail again. Hey, Danny. I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this. I meant to call earlier. That phrase. It was nothing. It was something Marcus said all the time. He was chronically behind on returning calls, and he'd always open with that small apology, that acknowledgement of the gap. It meant nothing, but my hands were shaking. Not dramatically, just a fine tremor at the fingertips. The kind you get when your blood sugar drops or when you've had too much caffeine. I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon. That was probably it. I made myself toast. I ate it, standing at the counter, looking out the window at the shared courtyard of my apartment complex. The sprinklers were still going. The sky was white. A maintenance worker was walking across the grass, with a leaf blower slung over his shoulder, not turned on, just carrying it somewhere. I watched him until he disappeared around the corner of Building C. I went to work. I work in municipal planning for the city of Rochester. I've been there 11 years. My job involves reviewing permit applications and site plans, attending public comment meetings and writing reports that no one reads, and occasionally driving out to look at properties where someone wants to build something or tear something down. It's not exciting work, but it's structured, and structure had been the thing keeping me upright since Marcus died. Wake up. Coffee drive. Desk, lunch at the same place. Desk, drive home. Dinner that was usually just whatever I could microwave. Television I didn't watch. Bed I couldn't sleep in. Repeat. That day I sat at my desk and I opened a permit application for a proposed cell tower on the east side. And I stared at the engineering drawings, and I could not make my brain process what I was looking at. The lines swam. I kept thinking about the room tone in those first 3 seconds of the voicemail, that quality of occupied silence, the sense that someone was there, holding the phone, existing in a space before they spoke. My coworker Beth asked if I was okay around 10:30. I told her I hadn't slept well. She gave me that look, the one everyone had been giving me for 3 weeks, the one that said, "I know you're grieving and I don't know what to do about it." I smiled in a way that was meant to release her from the obligation. She went back to her desk. At lunch, I sat in my car in the parking lot and played the voicemail 2 more times. I tried to listen past Marcus's voice, tried to hear what was in the background. The room tone. Was that a window? Was there a faint sound of traffic? I couldn't tell. The recording quality was compressed and flat in the way all voicemails are. I was probably hearing things that weren't there, constructing details from nothing the way you do when you're desperate to anchor something in reality. When you get this. What? When you get this, call me back. When you get this, I need to tell you something. When you get this, I'll be gone. No, that was me projecting. That was grief talking. Marcus had died without warning. He hadn't known. There was no message to leave. I deleted the voicemail. I deleted it, and I felt immediate, physical relief, like setting down something heavy. My shoulders dropped, my jaw unclenched. I put my phone in the glove compartment and went back inside, and finished my workday, and drove home, and made pasta, and watched 2 episodes of a cooking competition show, and went to bed at 10 ago, and slept for 6 hours straight, which was the longest unbroken stretch I'd managed since the funeral. The next morning, I checked my voicemail. There was a new one, same unknown number, same 4:47 a.m. timestamp. I stared at it for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The sprinklers hadn't started yet. The light was gray and thin. I didn't play it. I deleted it without listening and put my phone in my pocket and got in my car and drove to work. At my desk, I opened the cell tower permit application again and this time I could focus. I reviewed the structural specifications, the RF emissions report, the setback calculations. I wrote 3 emails. I attended a meeting about a proposed mixed-use development on the waterfront. I was fine. I was functioning. At 2:15 in the afternoon, my desk phone rang. The desk phone, the landline that sat on the corner of my desk and that I used maybe twice a week, mostly to call other departments. I picked it up. Planning department, this is Daniel. Room tone. 3 seconds of it, that same quality. Walls, air, a space. Then Marcus's voice, "Hey, Danny, I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this, the soft stop." Then silence, then dial tone. I set the receiver back in its cradle very carefully, like it was made of something fragile. My hand was steady. I noticed that. My hand was completely steady and my heartbeat was normal, and I was not afraid. That was the strangest part. I was not afraid. I was something else, something I didn't have a word for, something adjacent to recognition. Like I'd been waiting for this without knowing I was waiting for it. Beth looked over from her desk. "Who was that?" "Wrong number," I said. She nodded and went back to her spreadsheet. The fluorescent light above my desk buzzed at its usual frequency. The heating vent pushed its warm, dry air across my ankles. Everything was normal except that my dead brother had just called me at work and said the same 11 words he'd said in the voicemail, delivered in exactly the same cadence, with exactly the same gentle incompleteness. I left work at 4:30 and drove to Ellen's house. She lived 40 minutes away in a subdivision outside Fairport. The house was a split level that Marcus and I had painted together the summer he'd bought it. A long weekend of ladders and drop cloths and arguments about whether the trim should be white or cream. He'd won. It was cream. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a minute, looking at the trim, and then I went to the front door and rang the bell. Ellen answered in sweatpants and one of Marcus's old Rochester Amerks t-shirts. Her hair was in a bun, and she looked tired in a way that went deeper than sleep deprivation. She looked eroded, but she smiled when she saw me, and it was a real smile, and she stepped back to let me in. "Danny, I was going to call you this week. How are you doing?" She made a gesture with her hand, a kind of wobble. "You know. Do you want coffee?" I said yes. We went to the kitchen and she made coffee in the same French press Marcus had used every morning. I sat at the island where I'd sat 100 times before, and I watched her move through the familiar motions, and I tried to figure out how to say what I'd come to say. "Ellen. This is going to sound strange. Have you gotten any calls from Marcus's old number?" She turned around. Her expression didn't change exactly, but something behind it shifted, a slight tightening around the eyes. "His number was canceled. I called the carrier the week after. They said it would be deactivated within the billing cycle." "I know. I'm not saying it's from his number. I'm saying..." I stopped. I picked up the coffee mug she'd set in front of me and took a sip, even though it was too hot. "Have you gotten any voicemails? From unknown numbers? That sounded like him?" Ellen was quiet for a moment. She leaned against the counter with her arms crossed. The kitchen was very still. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and, from somewhere deeper in the house, the faint sound of the television in the den. She'd been watching something before I arrived. "No," she said. "Why?" "Have you?" I told her. I told her about the first voicemail, about the second one, about the call to my desk phone. I told her what he said. I said it out loud. "Hey, Danny, I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this," and then the stop. Ellen's face did something complicated while I talked. She listened without interrupting, without reacting visibly. And when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I started to regret coming. "Danny," she said finally, and her voice was careful. "Are you seeing someone?" "A therapist, I mean. This isn't grief. I know what grief does. I'm not hallucinating." "I didn't say you were hallucinating." The voicemail was real. It showed up in my phone's log. The call came to my desk phone at work. Other people were in the room. "Did anyone else hear what you heard?" I opened my mouth and then closed it. Beth had been there. But Beth had only heard my side. She hadn't heard the voice on the other end. "The voicemail," I said. "I deleted them. Both of them. But I can contact my carrier and get the records. The timestamps are there. The deposits are in the system." Ellen nodded slowly. She uncrossed her arms and picked up her own coffee. "Okay," she said. "Okay. I believe you received something. Danny, even if it's a real recording, it could be from before, you know? Carriers hold messages sometimes. There are delays. 3 weeks? I don't know. I don't know how it works." She looked at me, and her eyes were kind but also something else, wary. "What do you want me to say?" I didn't know. I didn't know why I'd come here, or what I expected her to tell me. I finished my coffee, and she walked me to the door and hugged me for a long time and said, "Call me if you need anything." And I said, "You too," and I got in my car and drove home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and listened to the building, the pipes settling, someone's television 2 floors down, the elevator mechanism humming in its shaft. My phone was on the nightstand. I'd turned off voicemail entirely, gone into my carrier's settings online and disabled the feature. No more voicemails. Problem solved. At 4:47 a.m., my phone rang. Not a voicemail deposit, a call. The screen lit up the dark room with that cold blue light, and the phone vibrated against the nightstand's wood surface with a sound like a dentist's drill. Unknown number. I watched it ring. 4 rings. 5, 6. It rang 9 times and then stopped. No voicemail because I'd disabled voicemail. So it just stopped, and the room went dark again, and I lay there with my heart beating normally, and my breathing steady, and that same unnameable feeling sitting in my chest like a stone I swallowed. I didn't sleep after that. I got up at 5 and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table and watched the morning come. The next day I called my carrier again, different representative. I asked him to look up the call logs for my number from the past 3 days. He found the 2 voicemail deposits. He found the incoming call from that morning, all from the same number. Can you tell me whose number that is? I can see it's currently unassigned. It was deactivated about 3 weeks ago. Deactivated, so it shouldn't be able to make calls. Correct. An unassigned number can't originate calls. But the system is showing incoming connections from that number to yours. He paused. That's not typical. I can escalate this to our network team. It might be a spoofing issue. Spoofing? Sometimes scammers mask their actual number, with a different one. It's possible someone is using software to make it appear that they're calling from this deactivated number and leaving voicemails of my dead brother's voice. Silence on the line. Then, "I'm sorry. Never mind. Please escalate it. I'd appreciate that." He gave me a case number. I wrote it on the back of an envelope. I never called to follow up and they never contacted me. I need to explain something about Marcus and me. We were close in the way that brothers who grew up in a quiet, stable household are close, not performatively, not dramatically, but structurally. He was 2 years younger. We'd shared a room until I was 13. We'd gone to the same college, different years. We'd settled in the same metro area without ever discussing it, as if it were simply the natural order of things. We talked on the phone maybe once a week. We saw each other every couple of weeks for dinner, or to help with some project around his house, or to watch football. It was easy. It was the kind of relationship you don't think about, because it doesn't require thinking about. It was simply there, like gravity, and now it wasn't. And the shape of its absence was something I couldn't map. I kept reaching for it, picking up my phone to text him, starting to tell a coworker, "My brother said," before catching myself. The neural pathways were still there, still firing, still expecting the circuit to complete. And it didn't. And each time it didn't, there was this small, bright flare of wrongness that I couldn't get used to. So when his voice came through the phone, even incomplete, even strange, the dominant feeling was not fear. It was relief. That was the thing I couldn't admit to Ellen. Couldn't admit to anyone. Hearing "Hey, Danny" in his voice, even surrounded by impossible circumstances, felt like the circuit completing, felt like gravity restoring itself. And that's why I stopped trying to explain it and started waiting for it. The calls came every morning at 4:47. Always from the same deactivated number. I turned voicemail back on so they could be deposited. Every morning, the same message. 11 seconds, 3 seconds of room tone. Then, "Hey, Danny, I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this." Soft stop. 3 more seconds, end. I stopped deleting them. They accumulated in my voicemail box. After a week, I had 7 copies of the same message. After 2 weeks, 14. I listened to them in sequence, sometimes, one after another, like a rosary. The same words, the same cadence, the same everything. I listened for variations and found none. Not a syllable different, not a breath out of place. But the room tone changed. It was subtle, so subtle I wasn't sure at first. But by the 3rd week, I was certain. The background quality of those opening 3 seconds was shifting. In the earliest recordings, there had been that sense of a contained interior space, walls, air, maybe a window. By the 2nd week, the room tone had taken on a different character. Slightly more resonant, a longer reverb on whatever ambient sound was present, as if the space had gotten larger or emptier. By the 4th week, now 7 weeks after Marcus's death, the room tone had changed again. There was something in it now, not a sound exactly, more like the negative space of a sound, an absence that had a shape. Like a conversation happening in another room, too far away to make out words, too present to ignore. A murmur that might have been ventilation, or might have been voices, or might have been nothing at all. I became very attentive to those 3 seconds. I'd listen to them over and over, pressing the phone hard against my ear, eyes closed, trying to hear past the compression, past the digital noise floor, past my own breathing. What was in that space? Where was it? Was it somewhere real? My work began to suffer. Not dramatically, I still showed up, still reviewed permits, still attended meetings, but I was slower, less thorough. I missed a setback error in a commercial application that my supervisor caught during final review. She mentioned it gently. I apologized. I told her I was still working through some personal things. She nodded. Everyone was still treating me with the tender distance that surrounds the recently bereaved. I started going to bed earlier so I could wake before the call came. I'd set an alarm for 4:30 and sit at the kitchen table with my phone in front of me, waiting. When 4:47 came and the phone buzzed with the voicemail deposit, it never rang, never gave me the option to answer. It went straight to voicemail every time. I'd listen immediately, fresh, alert, trying to catch whatever was in those 3 seconds before my rational mind could filter it. One morning, this was about 5 weeks after the first voicemail, 8 weeks after Marcus's death, I woke at 4:30 as usual and went to the kitchen and sat down and waited. 4:47 came. My phone did not buzz. I waited. 4:48, 4:49, 4:50, nothing. By 5 I was standing, pacing the small kitchen, checking and rechecking my phone. No missed calls, no voicemail, nothing. The screen was blank and dark and ordinary. I need to be honest about this, I felt panicked. Not the way you panic when something frightening happens. The way you panic when something you've come to depend on disappears. The way you panic when the phone doesn't ring, and it should have, and you don't know why, and the silence feels like abandonment. I was losing him again. The thought came clearly, without melodrama, without any sense that it was irrational. I was losing my brother again. He'd been reaching toward me for 5 weeks. Incomplete, incomprehensible, but reaching, and now he'd stopped. And the absence of the call was worse than the absence of the man, because the absence of the call was a second loss layered on top of the first. I called the deactivated number. I'd never done this before. In 5 weeks of receiving messages from it, I'd never once tried calling it back. I don't know why. Maybe I was afraid of breaking whatever fragile mechanism was producing the calls. Maybe I was afraid of what would happen if someone answered. But that morning, in the panic of the missed call, I pulled up the unknown number from my call log and pressed it and held the phone to my ear. It rang. Not a carrier error message. Not a "this number is no longer in service" recording. It rang. A real ring with that half-second gap between each pulse. The sound of a signal reaching out to a piece of hardware somewhere and asking it to respond. It rang 4 times, then it picked up. Room tone, that same quality. Except now, hearing it live, uncompressed in real time, I could hear more. I could hear that the space was large, larger than a room. It had the resonant quality of a space with high ceilings or no ceiling at all, and the murmur was there too, clearer now. Not voices, not quite, but something rhythmic, something with cadence, something that rose and fell like speech without containing any words I could identify. I said, "Marcus." The murmur stopped. Silence, absolute silence, not room tone, absence, as if the space itself had contracted, or as if whatever had been filling it had suddenly directed its attention toward the phone, toward me. Then Marcus's voice, exactly as always. "Hey, Danny. I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this." Soft stop. Then, for the first time, something new. A breath, a long, slow exhale, not mechanical, not distorted, a human breath. The kind of breath you take when you're about to say something's important and you're gathering yourself. The kind of breath Marcus used to take before telling me something he was nervous about, that he was proposing to Ellen, that he'd been diagnosed with high blood pressure, that he'd been thinking about Dad more than usual, and then a new word, one I hadn't heard before, spoken in his voice, in his cadence but quieter, almost whispered, still, and the line went dead. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear and the dial tone buzzing and the word still sitting in the air like something solid. Still. When you get this, still. Still what? Still here? Still waiting? Still alive? I played back the voicemail that hadn't arrived that morning because it had arrived after all. Deposited at 4:47 as always, but somehow not triggering a notification. I checked, and there it was, the same message, the same 11 seconds, unchanged. The still was not in it. The still had only happened live, only when I called him. I didn't call the number again. Not that day. I was afraid. And this was the first time I used that word for what I was feeling afraid. Not of what I might hear, but of what I might do, of how far I might follow this. I could feel the pull of it, the gravitational draw, and some part of me, some sober, clear-eyed part that had been watching from a distance, recognized the shape of obsession. Recognized that I was organizing my life around 4:47 a.m., that I was failing at work, that I hadn't seen friends in weeks, that Ellen had called me twice, and I hadn't returned her calls because I didn't want to have the conversation about therapy again. I called Ellen that evening. "Danny, I was worried about you. I know, I'm sorry. I've been. I didn't know how to finish that sentence. Busy? No. Preoccupied? Too mild. I've been having a hard time. Are the calls still happening? Yes." Silence. Then, "Danny, I want you to come for dinner on Saturday. Will you do that?" I said I would. We hung up. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 4:30. At 4:47, the voicemail arrived as usual. I listened. Same message, but the room tone, those 3 opening seconds, had changed again. It was closer now. Whatever was in the background had moved forward in the mix. The murmur, the cadence, the thing that wasn't quite voices. It was louder, more present, and underneath it, so faint I might have been imagining it, a sound like breathing, not one. Breath, many, a room full of people breathing in the same rhythm. I went to work. I sat at my desk. I stared at my computer screen. At 10 a.m., my desk phone rang, and I answered it without thinking room tone. But this time, no 3-second pause, no preamble. Marcus's voice, immediate, warm, mid-sentence, as always. "Danny, I've been trying to reach you. I need you to listen to me. I don't have a lot of," then the soft stop, then dial tone. I sat very still. The fluorescent light buzzed. Beth was at her desk, typing. The heating vent pushed warm air across the room. Everything was normal, and nothing was normal, and I realized my eyes were burning, and my cheeks were wet. I was crying. For the first time since Marcus died, I was crying. I went to the bathroom, and locked myself in a stall and pressed my forehead against the cold metal partition and cried until I couldn't breathe. And then I stood there, gasping and shaking with my eyes, swollen shut, and I thought, he's trying to tell me something. He's trying to reach me. He's been trying for weeks, and whatever system he's using only allows 11 seconds at a time. And it's breaking through in pieces. And if I listen long enough, if I stay patient, I'll hear the whole thing. I know how that sounds. I knew how it sounded. Then I was a rational person. I worked in municipal planning. I reviewed engineering drawings and zoning codes and understood the physical world as a system of measurable, predictable forces. I did not believe in ghosts. I did not believe in the afterlife. I had not been religious since I was 14 years old. But I believed my brother's voice. I believed the breath I'd heard when I called him back. I believed the word still. I believed I've been trying to reach you. I need you to listen to me. Saturday came. I drove to Ellen's house for dinner. She'd made lasagna. Marcus's recipe, the one he'd gotten from our mother. The house smelled like garlic and tomato, and the familiar wood and lemon scent of the cleaning product Marcus had always used on the hardwood floors. His dog, a lab mix named Walter, pushed his head into my thigh when I sat down, and I scratched behind his ears and felt the warm weight of him leaning against my leg. Ellen poured wine. We ate. We talked about small things, her job, my job, a trip she was thinking about taking to see her sister in Portland. We talked about Marcus a little, memories, funny stories, the time he'd tried to build a deck and put 3 of the joists in backward, the time he'd gotten lost driving to our cousin's wedding and ended up at a gas station in a town called Massacre, and called me laughing so hard he couldn't give me directions. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Ellen was on the couch. I was in the armchair, Marcus's armchair. It still smelled faintly like him. Or maybe I was imagining that. "Danny," Ellen said, "I need to tell you something." I looked at her. She was holding her wine glass with both hands, staring down into it. The morning Marcus died, before I found him, I was upstairs taking a shower, and when I got out, I had a missed call on my phone from his cell. I went very still. I didn't think about it at the time. He called me from downstairs sometimes if he needed something and didn't want to yell. I figured I'd just see what he wanted when I went down. And then she stopped, took a breath, and then I went down and he was on the couch. "Did he leave a voicemail?" She shook her head. "Just the missed call." I checked. No voicemail. "But Danny," she looked up at me. The call log said 10:47 a.m. The paramedics estimated time of death as somewhere between 10:10 and 10:20, based on the physical signs. So he called you after. His phone was in his pocket. It was still in his hand, in his pocket, I mean. His hand was in his pocket, and the phone was there. The paramedics had to move his hand to get to it. We sat with that for a long time. The house was quiet. Walter was asleep on the floor between us, his paws twitching gently. "Why didn't you tell me?" I said, not accusatory, just asking, because I thought I'd made a mistake, misread the time, misremembered, because the alternative. She shook her head. "I didn't want the alternative. He's calling me, Ellen." "I know, you told me." "No, I mean, it's changing. The messages are getting longer. He's saying more. He said he's been trying to reach me. He said he needs me to listen. Ellen set down her wine glass. Danny, listen to me. I loved Marcus. I love him, and I would give anything to hear his voice again. But I don't think, she pressed her lips together, I don't think this is something you should follow. Why? Because I don't know where it goes, and I don't think you do either. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell her about the breath, about still, about the way the room tone was changing, getting closer, getting more populated, getting more present. I wanted to tell her that it felt like Marcus was approaching from a long distance, getting nearer to the phone with each call, and that if I was patient, he would arrive. But I looked at her face, and I saw something there that I recognized. It was the same expression she'd had at the funeral, the same expression she'd had when the paramedic told her about aortic dissection. It was the face of someone who is using every ounce of their strength to accept what is real and not reach for what is impossible. I didn't argue. I drove home. It was late. The highway was empty. I drove with the radio off, and the windows cracked and the cold air coming in, and I thought about 10:47 a.m. on a Saturday 3 weeks before my brother started calling me. His hand in his pocket, his phone in his hand, the call that went out after his heart had already finished tearing itself apart. Did he know? In some last flicker of neural activity, some final electromagnetic stutter of the brain, did some part of him reach for the phone? Reach for Ellen? Reach for anyone? And if that reach didn't stop, if whatever generated it was still going, still pushing signal through dead infrastructure, still trying to complete the circuit, what would it eventually say? I got home at 11. I brushed my teeth. I went to bed. I set my alarm for 4:30. At 4:47, the voicemail arrived. I listened immediately. 3 seconds of room tone. But now the space was enormous. The resonance was cathedral-like, and the murmur was no longer murmur. It was voices, plural. Still no words I could make out, but the cadence was undeniable. People talking, people communicating. A vast, quiet, populated space full of conversation just below the threshold of comprehension. Then Marcus, his voice clear and closer than it had ever been. "Hey, Danny, I meant to call earlier. Listen, when you get this, I need you to know it doesn't stop. It just soft stop. End of message. 20 seconds. The message was 20 seconds now, not 11. It had grown. I played it again. I need you to know it doesn't stop. The sentence was clear, complete. And then it just, before the cutoff, it just what? It just continues. It just changes. It just keeps going. I need you to know it doesn't stop. I sat at the kitchen table and I turned the sentence over and over. Was it comfort, warning, description? Was he telling me that consciousness continues after death? That he was still aware, still present, still himself somewhere in that cathedral space full of quiet voices? Or was he warning me, stay away, don't follow. It doesn't stop, meaning you can't stop it, and it will take you. Both interpretations felt true. Both felt false. Both felt like me imposing narrative on something that might have no narrative, something that might just be signal, reflex. The electromagnetic ghost of a hand reaching for a phone in a pocket, replaying over and over because the hardware hadn't been properly deactivated. The loop hadn't been closed. The circuit was still searching for its completion. I called the number. At 4:53 a.m., 6 minutes after the voicemail arrived, I called Marcus's dead number. It rang. Once. Then it picked up. The space was there. Vast. Resonant. The voices were there. Louder now. More immediate, layered on top of each other in a way that should have been cacophonous, but wasn't. They had a harmony to them. A structure. Like a crowd of people all saying different things, but somehow coordinating, somehow building towards something together. Marcus, I said. I'm listening, his voice. Not from a distance this time. Right there, right at the phone. As close as if he were holding the receiver to his lips. Danny, good, okay. I need you to hear this because I don't know how many more times I can. A pause. The breath again. That long, gathering exhale. It doesn't stop after. It just changes location. Do you understand? It changes location. You're still going, but somewhere else. And I can hear you. I can hear you from here. I've been hearing you for. The soft stop. Then silence, then the vast space, then the voices, continuing their layered conversation without me. I held the phone to my ear for 4 minutes. I didn't speak. I just listened. The voices rose and fell. Occasionally one would come closer, would surface above the others for a moment, and I'd hear something almost recognizable. A cadence that might have been my father's speech pattern, a rhythm that might have been my mother's laugh, familiar shapes in unfamiliar material. Then the line went dead. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were steady. My breathing was normal. I was not crying. I was not afraid. I was not anything I could identify. I was sitting in my kitchen at 4:57 a.m. on a Sunday morning in late November, and my dead brother had just told me that death was not an ending, but a relocation, and that he could hear me from wherever he was, and the voices in the background might have been everyone I'd ever lost, and I felt nothing, a vast, resonant nothing, an emptiness with architecture. I went to work on Monday. I reviewed permits. I attended a meeting. Beth asked if I wanted to get lunch, and I said sure. And we went to the Thai place on Monroe, and I ate pad Thai. And she talked about her daughter's volleyball tournament, and I nodded in the right places, and none of it felt real. Not in a dissociative way, not in a clinical way. It all felt real in the way that a waiting room feels real, functional, present, but not the point, not the thing you're there for, just the space you occupy while you wait for the thing that matters. That night, I called the number again. It picked up after one ring. The space, the voices, and Marcus immediately. Danny, you're calling more, that's. I can feel when you do. It's like he laughed. My brother's laugh, warm and brief and real. It's like a knock from the other side of something. Listen, I don't want you to worry. I'm not. This isn't bad. Where I am isn't bad. It's just different. It's very different. And I can't stay on long because it takes something from the soft stop. Silence, voices, deadline. I started calling every night, not just at 4:47, at different times, midnight, 2 a.m., 10 p.m. Sometimes the line would ring, and no one would answer. Sometimes it would go straight to that carrier error message. The number you have reached is not in service. But sometimes, maybe 1 in 3 tries, it would pick up. And Marcus would be there, and he'd speak. The conversations got longer, not by much, 30 seconds, 45 once. almost a full minute. He told me things, fragmented things, disjointed things. He told me the space was large and populated, and that he recognized people there but not by sight. He told me there was no body. He told me the voices were everyone, and that they were building something together, but he didn't know what. He told me he could hear me when I spoke, not just on the phone, but in general, in my apartment, at work, everywhere. He said my voice came through thin but constant, like a radio turned way down in another room. He told me he missed me. He said it exactly once, in a voice that cracked slightly, and then the line went dead, and I sat on my kitchen floor with my knees pulled up and my back against the cabinet, and I pressed the phone to my forehead, and I said, "I miss you too," to no one. I was not sleeping. I was not eating regularly. I'd lost weight, maybe 15 pounds in the 2 months since the first voicemail. Beth had started giving me looks that were less tender and more concerned. My supervisor had called me into her office for a check-in that was clearly a preliminary conversation about performance. I told her I was struggling with the loss of my brother. She was sympathetic. She suggested counseling. I said I'd look into it. I didn't. Ellen called me. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message. "Danny, please call me back. I'm worried about you. I drove by your apartment on Thursday and your car was there at 2 p.m. on a workday. Are you okay? Please call." I called her back 2 days later. "I'm fine, Ellen. I took a sick day." "Danny, are the calls still coming?" "Yes, and you're still." "Yes." Long pause. "I think you should stop." "I can't." "Why?" "Because he's there. Because he answers. Because I've spent my entire life with a brother. And now I have one again. Even if it's only in 30-second fragments through a dead phone line. Even if the connection is degrading. Even if the space he's in sounds like something that's getting bigger every time I hear it. I'll be fine, Ellen. I promise. She didn't believe me. I could hear it in the way she said goodbye. That quiver held-in quality that meant she was deciding something, making a plan. I knew I should have been more reassuring, more present, more convincing, but I didn't have the energy. My energy was organized around one thing. The calls continued. The voicemails continued. 4:47 a.m. every morning without exception. But the messages were changing in a way that had started to unsettle me. Not because of what Marcus said. His fragments were still warm, still recognizable, still him. But because of the room tone, the space. It was getting louder. The voices were getting more distinct. And they were saying things. Not to me. They weren't addressing me, but I was hearing them more clearly now, as if the phone's connection to that space was widening, letting more of it through. And the things I heard were not frightening, not threatening, but insistent, repetitive. They said things like "here" and "come through" and "it's ready" and "almost," and they said them in overlapping rhythms that built and built and built until Marcus's voice would cut through, and then they'd fall back. One night, about 3 months after the first voicemail, I called, and Marcus answered, and he sounded different, not distressed, not wrong, but urgent, compressed, like he was speaking quickly because time was running out. "Danny, listen. I've been trying to figure out how to say this, and I don't think there's a good way. The space here, it's not just for people who already, It's not just one direction. Do you understand? People can come toward it. You can move toward it without. He stopped, not the soft stop, a deliberate stop, like he was choosing his next words very carefully. I need you to stop calling. I pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it. Then I pressed it back. What? I need you to stop calling. Every time you call, you get closer, and Danny, that's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to arrive here eventually. Everyone does. But you're walking toward it early. I can hear you getting nearer. Your voice is louder every time, and the others can hear you too, and they're soft. Stop. Dead line. I stared at the phone. My apartment was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside, its headlights sweeping briefly across the ceiling. The digital clock on the microwave read 1:34 a.m. I called back. The number rang and rang. No answer. I called again. The number you have reached is not in service again. Same message, again, same. I called 14 times in a row, each time getting the carrier error, and then on the 15th try, it picked up. Not Marcus. Voices, all of them, right at the phone. Not murmuring, not layered. Speaking, in unison, one word, still, then dead line. I put the phone down. I walked to the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked thin, pale. My eyes were sunken, and the skin beneath them was dark and papery. I looked sick. I looked like someone who was disappearing. I thought about what Marcus said, that I was getting closer, that every call moved me toward the space, that the others could hear me, that they were, waiting, welcoming, hungry. I thought about still, about the first time I'd heard it, weeks ago, about what it might mean, still here, still coming, still alive, barely. I went back to the kitchen. I picked up my phone. I opened the voicemail box, 63 saved messages, all from Marcus, all beginning with those 3 seconds of room tone that had evolved from intimate to vast. 63 pieces of my brother's voice, delivered from somewhere I was apparently walking toward. I deleted them all. I deleted them one by one, listening to the first second of each before dismissing it, and with each deletion I felt something tighten in my chest. Not relief this time. Loss. Fresh loss, layered on old loss, losing him again deliberately by choice. When they were gone, I went to my carrier's website and blocked the number. Then I deactivated voicemail. Then I turned off my phone entirely and put it in the drawer under the kitchen sink, behind the extra garbage bags and the bottle of Drano. Then I sat at the table and I put my head down on my arms and I stayed there until the morning came. That was 4 months ago. I have not received a call from Marcus since that night. The blocking, the deactivation, something worked, or he stopped trying, or the thing I was walking toward receded when I stopped walking. I don't know which. I try not to think about which. I'm sleeping again, eating. I've regained most of the weight. My work has stabilized. Beth and I get lunch twice a week now, and I listen to her talk about her daughter, and I ask questions, and I'm present. I am present. I'm here still. See here. Ellen and I have dinner every other week. We don't talk about the calls. We talk about Marcus in the normal way, memories, fondness, the gradual gentling of grief into something you carry rather than something that carries you. She looks better too, less eroded, more like a person who is building a future rather than managing a loss, But, there's a but. There's always a but. Every morning I wake at 4:47, not by alarm, by something in my body that knows that time now, that has internalized it the way shift workers internalize their schedules. I wake at 4:47 and I lie in the dark and I listen. Not to the phone. The phone is charging on the nightstand now, silent, normal. I listen to the apartment, to the building, to the air itself. And sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes, in that first moment of waking, before full consciousness settles in, I hear something. A quality in the silence, a room tone, large, resonant, populated, like a vast space just behind the wall of the audible world, full of quiet voices conversing in rhythms I almost recognize, and one of them is his. Close, patient, waiting. It doesn't stop, he told me. It just changes location. I don't call. I don't answer. I don't follow it. I'm here. I'm still here. But every morning at 4:47, the distance between here and there feels a little smaller. Not because I'm moving, because it is. I tell myself this is grief. I tell myself this is the brain's inability to release a pattern once it's been established. I tell myself that neural pathways don't care about reality. They fire whether the stimulus is present or imagined, whether the brother is alive or dead, whether the phone rings or doesn't. I tell myself a lot of things at 4:47 in the morning, and then the moment passes, and the room tone fades, and the sun comes up, and I make coffee, and I go to work, and I'm fine. I'm fine. But last week I found something I can't explain. I was cleaning out the drawer under the kitchen sink, the one where I'd hidden the phone all those months ago. I pulled everything out. Garbage bags, Drano, old sponges, a screwdriver I'd forgotten about. At the very back of the drawer, tucked into the corner where the cabinet meets the wall, there was a post-it note. Yellow, square, Marcus's handwriting. I'd know it anywhere. That angular, slightly left-leaning script he'd had since high school. 2 words. Almost there. I don't know when it appeared. I don't know how. I've been alone in this apartment for months. No one has a key. The drawer hadn't been opened since the night I put the phone in it. I stood in the kitchen holding the post-it note, and the room was very quiet, and the air had that quality, that resonant, populated, cathedral quality, and I could hear them. Not through the phone, through the walls, through the floor, through the distance between alive and not alive, that was apparently no longer as vast as I'd believed. I put the note back in the drawer. I closed it. I made coffee. I went to work. I'm still here, but I don't think here means what it used to.